What's new in update 167? We have an interesting balance patch this time around, changing up the stats on a handful of perk decks and weapons. We'll start with the former. 5 perk decks have received changes. Stoic, first of all, was ever so slightly nerfed. The 16 seconds of damage over time has been reduced to 12 seconds, which may sound like a buff, but all that means is you'll take the same amount of damage more quickly. The ticks of damage you receive will be slightly larger as a result of this change. Stoic hasn't really changed all that much in terms of functionality, but you may need to use the flask sooner than you think after this patch. Next up is Gambler. The perk deck will now grant you an inherent 40% health increase, in addition to the cooldown for the medical supplies perk, which heals all players when ammo is collected, being reduced by 1 second down to 3. This is a straight up buff in every way. I'm not really sure if Gambler will take its place as the ideal perk deck for being a team player again though, as it's still competing with Crew Chief and Tag Team, which has also received a buff. You can now activate the perk on players who are up to 18 meters away. And while the changelog does say that they made activating the effect easier, I haven't noticed any difference. It's still as clunky as before. Regardless, when the perk is actually active, kills made by the owner of the perk deck will extend its effect by 1.3 seconds, more than double what it was before. This means that so long as you're averaging a kill per second and some change, you could keep the health regen for you and a teammate up for an incredibly long time. High damage weapons with fast reloads are ideal here, such as auto shotties. I could very well see Tag Team becoming a frequently used perk deck because of this, although the actual healing values of it remain unchanged, so only time will tell. The last 2 perks are intrinsically related in this patch, starting with Infiltrator. An overall 10% more damage resistance was added to the deck, in addition to a change to the Overdog perk, which is now the first to be unlocked in the deck. Upon striking an enemy with melee for a full second after that, your next melee strike will deal 10 times the damage. On top of this, the effect chains, meaning so long as there isn't a gap of a second or more between strikes, all of your melee hits will be 10 times as powerful, making melee lethal for once. There's no cooldown on this either, meaning the best melee weapons to use with this deck are fast-striking high-damage ones, such as the Ice Pick, Katana, or El Verdugo. Slow-swinging weaponry won't feel any effect from these changes. And finally, Sociopath was changed to match Infiltrator's buff. You get 20% more armor just by having the deck equipped, and the No Talk perk was replaced with Overdog, the same one from Infiltrator. And while this does ruin Sociopath's naming scheme, having perks named after the Hotline Miami levels and all, it also means that Sociopath has suddenly become a very fun and deadly option for all difficulties sans 1 down. If you're looking for a fun build to try with this, my Sociopath build linked in the corner has been made even better by these changes. I say changes because several weapons have received balance patches as well, starting with the Flamethrower. The ammo pickup rate was buffed by 666%, the DPS was increased by 220%, and the chance to ignite enemies was increased by 40%. The only downside to all of this is the duration of Afterburn was nerfed down to 1.5 seconds from 6. That hardly matters though, as it seems Overkill has made the Flamethrower a potentially viable weapon. I found myself killing all enemies, even bulldozers, without much trouble. I barely ever ran out of reserves too. I worry they may have buffed it too much, but don't let me get ahead of myself. Try out the Flamethrower for yourself and see how you like it. Next up, the Airbow has been nerfed, hopefully surprising nobody. I mean, come on, the thing was overpowered as all hell. One of my biggest gripes with it was the concealment value coming in at 28. This has been nerfed down to 5. It's gone from needing little to no tweaking to fit into any dodge build to being a complete non-option for anything involving concealment. And while this change is for the better, it also feels like a little bit of a bait and switch. Hopefully nobody bought the DLC just to ante up their dodge 1-down builds, only to get shafted by this nerf. Still, it needed to be done. The Heather SMG has had an increase of 8 stability and 3 concealment, in addition to a reworked recoil pattern to quote be easier to control and more predictable. These changes also affect the Akimbo variant. These are good changes in my opinion, as I felt the Heather was a little bit mediocre before. It's good to see some DLC-less players having more options in the secondary slot. Speaking of which, the judge has been changed. Not nerfed, not buffed, just changed. Its ammo reserve has been increased from 25 to 40, however, its pickup rate was reduced by 20%. This change seems entirely unnecessary. I mean, the judge is great, maybe even too good, but I don't think any argument of its potential overpoweredness stemmed from its ammo reserves. I'd say the 200 plus damage, intense concealment, and swift reload were the reasons one could argue it's overpowered, not the ammo economy. This feels like change just for the sake of change. Well, either way, the changes seem to balance themselves out to some degree. I'd say the new ammo pickup rate feels comparable to that of the 5.7, which reminds me, the 5.7 has received a straight up nerf. Its accuracy and stability were both lowered by 16 to, quote, compensate for the innate ability to pierce through shields and enemies. Okay, but that's what the low ammo pickup rate was for, right? Again, anyone arguing about the 5.7's state of balance would sooner point to its damage and concealment before its accuracy and stability, and honestly, I never saw anyone saying the 5.7 was OP. Most people liked it as it was. You can shoot clean through shields at the cost of a weak ammo economy. But with this change, the 5.7 needs near every accuracy skill in the game to even come close to 100 accuracy. I wholeheartedly disagree with this change. The nerf of these secondaries seem to miss the mark on why these weapons may have needed changing, and instead just make the judge feel a bit different and the 5.7 less reliable. These free weapons being rebalanced while clearly overpowered grenade launchers like the China Puff stay the same makes me feel bad for players who don't own Ultimate Edition and just want a halfway decent build within the base game. Either way, let's move on. A new community safe was added, this time for armor skins. I've linked the website where the skins are showcased below. While the quality of them is of course entirely one's opinion, I'm personally loving what the safe has to offer. I'm really hoping to get the yellow police skin myself. The previously time-locked Halloween heists have now been made available year-round, so now you can choose to play Safe House Nightmare or Cursed Kill Room whenever you want, which for me will be never. Still, those of you who like these heists or are missing out on their achievements ought to appreciate this change. Many bugs were squashed throughout various jobs, and finally, Big Bank's pre-planning has received some cost adjustments. Thermite now costs a mere 5 favors, down from 8, and while this means it cannot be purchased alongside Bus Stop, which still costs 6 favors, you can buy it with the newly discounted C4 tunneling or elevator escape instead at 3 favors each. These adjustments should make Big Bank more fun overall and allow you to have a lot more say in your plan of attack. I'd still argue that Bus Stop is the best escape, but if you're playing with a smaller crew, Thermite will be a much safer vault cracking plan. What I'm saying is that you have options now. Pick and choose what's best for you. That'll be everything. While there were some questionable weapon balance changes, this update has brought some more viable variety to Payday 2. Some perk decks, weapons, and pre-planning options that were previously inadvisable above overkill now have a chance to shine. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate it if you thought about subscribing. Thanks for watching, and take it easy.